Warwick Stannis from AG Coombs, who's with us here today in the studio, Brett Casson, who's also joining us from Autodesk, and Ian Pearce from LSAir, and I think both remote. Ian's up in Brisbane. Welcome, and I might just start off, Ian, if I could throw to you and put you on the spot here, and seeing if you could maybe kick off the questions here, please, for the group and for Sid.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, good evening, Sid. Good to talk to you again.
Pleasure, Ian.
Yeah, you touched on some of the initiatives that you're undertaking currently with some of the specialty trade contractors internationally. So I just wanted to ask, based on the feedback and review of some of those, which ones do you reckon are going to be most important or most relevant to us in Australia?
I think the one area that we need to do a better job at, Ian, is really driving better connectivity between our design and construction. I think so from a desktop to cloud connection, we just need to do a lot more. So I think that's one area that we're going to focus pretty heavily on going into next year. I think the other piece that we've heard quite a bit has been around how do you manage your resources in the field. So things like resource management, labor tracking, labor management, I think that's something that is today missing in our platform, and we've been asked for that quite a bit. And I think that's another area that we're going to look to develop. And then finally, I think it's really around installation of assets in the field. I think our acquisition of Assemble gave us some strong capabilities, and I think we need to spend more time ensuring a better customer experience for our customers, frankly. So I think those are kind of the areas that we're thinking of. I will say longer term, I think an area that we do want to focus a lot more, this notion of convergence, which is we've got manufacturing capabilities today within Autodesk, whether it's Inventor or Fusion 360, and then we've got our design authoring product, and then we've got obviously a construction portfolio. How do we bring these all together into a very unified, seamless experience for our customers? It's not an easy endeavor by any means, but this is one at the platform level, at the Autodesk Forge platform level that we can focus. And so I think this is more of a long-term vision, but when I say long-term, that is something that is kicking off in the relatively soon, time horizon, and it's one which I think you should all keep an eye out on. I think it's incumbent on us to deliver that to the industry.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. I might throw to you, Warwick, if you've got some thoughts or some questions for the team, and Sid.
Yeah. Look, Sid, thanks very much for a really interesting presentation. You talked about the Autodesk journey from CAD to BIM to the construction cloud, but you also mentioned that you're seeing the increasing importance and stakeholder engagement around digital twins. Can you give us some insights into how you see the industry evolving, or what it needs to do to make that link between construction and digital twins more efficient and effective? And have you got any insights in terms of any part of the sort of global community that's doing that better than others?
Great question there. So I would say that the way we begin the digital twin concept, we've taken a different approach to it. Our focus has been in the journey right from the design phase. Today, digital twins get created really after the fact. It's a very laborious process. You have to scan the buildings, and a lot of time, they don't start BIM. A lot of the existing building stock wasn't designed in BIM. And so understanding, having a living model is critical. So I think we are figuring what Autodesk Tandem, which is our foray into digital twins, is really meant at delivering is right up front, where you start parameters and you start capturing information as you go through the entire process of construction, ultimately over the handover. That rich data model continues to exist and gets updated over time. I think that is where we think we can add a lot of value to owners. And at the same time, that is something that even contractors, be it head contractors or trade contractors, can leverage and subscribe to manage parts of their business. So I think we are still relatively, I'll say Autodesk Tandem is today sold commercially, but there is a lot more that we are looking to do. At the same time, to your question, there are a lot of other companies, a lot of our competitors that are entering into digital twin. They're all taking a different approach to it. If you ask for a definition, I'm sure you probably ask for, you speak to 5 companies, you probably get 7 definitions of digital twin. But I think it's not lost upon everyone that at the end of the day, having a static model doesn't really serve the needs of customers. And as we think about providing new areas of revenue growth for our customers, having something that really helps them with respect to an owner can be extremely valuable. At the same time, as we think about really addressing our owner customers, they are demanding information which otherwise was provided in paper, whether it was delivered in back in the day in a floppy drive, it was delivered in a binder or a PDF of documents, but you have to sift through, and it's really unintelligent. I think digital twins and intelligent model system really can alleviate some of the challenges.
Thanks, Sid.
Thanks, Sid. Thanks, Warwick. So just to be a bit inclusive here, we might throw to Brett here, and maybe not necessarily a question, Brett, but just a comment on what you've heard so far, based on Sid's earlier presentation and just some of the discussion so far. I think your role, if I'm correct, is a bit more technical than Sid, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Look, it was a great presentation from Sid, and I think it really encompasses where we're going as a business, but also encapsulates, where the industry is at. A couple of key points, and I want to maybe bring that commentary back to an Australian context. And what we're really seeing here in Australia, and I'd say over the past decade, is really around reform. So in the really early days of BIM, the conversations that we were having is that, we were having to sell the idea of BIM to an owner or a client. And there was a lot of trepidation and a lot of pushback and a lot of, worry and angst about this. But actually, it was all around reform. And the irony is that, the way in which BIM should have been positioned was that this actually helps you as an owner. Fast forward to today, and a lot of the commentary that Sid has just made really around digital twin, and I think we need to be really careful around digital twin. We don't want digital twin to be what BIM was. We don't want one line in a contract that says you must deliver a digital twin. I think there's a danger that might happen. So I think we as an industry need to really inform our clients and government as to what we want in this space and what we can deliver. And then in turn, they need to be really prescriptive about what they want and how they're going to manage the asset in a more digital way. And I think there's a lot of good work going in that space. I think in terms of Sid's presentation around mergers and acquisitions, I think what's driving that is a lot of what the industry here today is feeling, which is there's a rapid need for change in the industry, and that change has already been happening, but I think it's the acceleration of that change and this insatiable desire to be digital everything. Now, a lot of that has come from a push, so from the industry pushing the clients to say we're doing it this way regardless. But now I think the big change that's happening is the clients, and in particular the public sector, is getting really mature and savvy around their requirements back to the industry. Yeah. So I think, the idea of having a platform to service that is absolutely mission critical. The idea of, and I think Sid alluded to it, to this unification of applications that sit on a platform, and for customers, our customers, Autodesk customers, be able to access their data, the meaningful parts of their data, so that they can fulfill those requirements is like number one on the priority list. So I think, there's lots happening. The one constant now in our industry is change, and I think the acceleration of change. And a lot of what Sid alluded to in his presentation is really around change.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Brett. Ian, I saw you nodding and smiling a little bit when Brett was talking about digital twins, and I know when I get to work with yourself and Warwick, I learn something every day and every time I speak to you guys. So I know you're very passionate about what we call LOI, or level of information, and maybe just some comments from yourself, Ian, about your thoughts on just what Brett's comments were.
Yeah, I guess to kind of carry on the theme, obviously all of the work that all of us do within BIM MEP Australia is around laying that foundation and guidance around structuring of information. It's the one area where we don't want to be overly creative and imaginative. It's the kind of the common part of the equation. And if we can get a chance to sort of lay those foundations early on in the piece, so we set that out at the beginning, or the requirements at the beginning, then it allows us to move forward through the design, construction, and to an as-built or digital twin in a much more efficient way. It's not the sort of conversation you want to be having 2/3 down the track. So yeah, interesting. We obviously have our views on how we think we're working to improve the quality of what we do in modelling. I'd be interested to hear from Sid with a different view and a bit more of a global view on what he thinks ways in which we can improve that quality of design through construction modelling, and maybe taking some of these concepts of BIM MEPOS on board.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we have heard from customers. I think I wish I had an answer for you now, but I think this is something that we need to crack the nut. I mean, that is at the end of the day extremely critical to have. You design for constructability, and today you have the design models which aren't constructible, and there's a lot of rework and back and forth that happens. And we need to figure that particular process out. And that is something as part of the workshop that we held a few weeks ago with the ENR 600 subcontractor base here in the US. That was one of the things that was highlighted as something that they need to see more improvement in. But you do raise a very valid point.
Thanks, Sid. I might come back to Warwick now and see if you've had some more thoughts and some more questions after listening to the comments so far.
Yeah, thank you. Sid, you mentioned on your last slide the sort of the drivers around sustainability, and certainly there's been a lot of discussion in the Australian media and in the industry around degasification and electrification of buildings. Can you give us any insights in terms of how you see that evolving in terms of this integration of mechanical and electrical? Traditionally, I think there's been a strong focus on the mechanical, but have you seen any sort of trends globally in terms of how mechanical and electrical are being integrated, and will that affect your product development and over time?
So in response to your question, I mean, the short answer, I haven't seen it. And that is something, I will take back as a follow-up to provide us with perspective. I do not have visibility into that specific question now. But just on the concept of sustainability, what we are seeing increasingly is in the move towards net zero carbon. We're seeing that really in EMEA. We are seeing a big push. It's a little different in different parts of the world. I think in the US, it's still something that owners aren't pushing as heavily yet. It's not really a differentiator to win work, and in a lot of cases, it's a nice to have, but not a must-have. So you're not being mandated to use certain sustainable or sustainability criteria. I think in EMEA, very, very different. It's very much a differentiator. I think you're seeing head contractors as well as subcontractors actually call out the fact that they are adhering to sustainable practices within their own organization, as well as the way that they're actually building on behalf of the owners. So that is actually used in a way as a way to differentiate their practices. I think the US is probably a bit of a laggard there. But in respect to electrification and mechanical, I think I'll come back to you with a more educated response. I'm not sure if Brett has a perspective there.
Yes, Sid. I mean, I think we're kind of following, to many respects, what's happening in EMEA here. I think, everyone, I think, on this call has heard what the federal government here has committed to and not committed to over the last few weeks. But I think, broadly speaking, this will be driven by the states. I think most of the states have some sort of commitment to net zero. And I live in Sydney, so I know New South Wales has a commitment, I think, by 2050 for net zero. My observation is a lot of this is now being driven by a lot of the transportation projects, this huge spend in transportation that's happening. And a lot of from the design methodology through to construction is trying to identify where can we actually measure our carbon footprint. What do we need to do to offset that? And there's a project in Sydney where they've actually built a solar farm to offset their carbon emissions against some of the construction materials and methodologies going into that project. I think we're going to see an amplification of that. I don't think we're in a position in terms of using, high performance materials in particular on transportation projects, just simply because of procurement cost. But I think we're going to be seeing more of how can we offset our carbon footprint on this project? How can we demonstrate that, both for the community and for the end client or the end owner being more often not the public sector? So we're definitely seeing a push. I would say in the last 6 months, I've probably had more conversations with customers around sustainability and net zero than actually digital engineering and BIM. I'll be absolutely honest with you. I think this is absolutely front of mind. And it's seen as a differentiator, I think, now. So definitely there is a push, a huge push. And I think, once again, it'll be the industry probably that will push before the government. The industry will be way ahead of the government on this. I think we're always going to be ahead in many instances.
All right, thanks, guys. Ian, any more questions from yourself?
Yeah, I thought I might like to try and circle back to the day-to-day practicalities. So, for those of us that are all on the briefing this morning, and whatever the current status is on digital journey, I just wanted to kind of say what initiatives or pathways are there to be able to better liaise or engage with Autodesk to partner their needs and requirements.
Yeah, so I think a great way to do that is with our strategy team. I think this is, and again, I'm sure you have strong relationships with your Autodesk. To the extent if you're an Autodesk customer, you've got your Autodesk success manager, you've got your technical sales team, you've got a team around you. But what we bring to the table as a strategy team here within the Construction Solutions business unit is to really have those really frank, candid discussions to really understand your pain points and then take that across a multiple set of customers like yourselves and then really help drive some of those learnings, feedback into a future product development and to ensure that we are really helping build things that Frank really want and we are prioritizing the things that you really want. So I would say continue to engage with us. I think engage with Sumit on my team who represents the APAC region. And we will be more than happy to spend time with you. As I said, we will look to do a workshop with all of you to really understand your need here. And then from there, we don't believe in saying, it's like a one and done type of an approach. It's an ongoing dialogue. And we, at the end of the day, want to be capturing information from you and then putting it into the product and making sure that we're making traction and progress against some of the commitments that we made. So I'd say just keep that communication ongoing with us. We'd really love to understand how we can better serve the need. And Sumit on my team in the APAC region would be a great point of contact. And I'm sure we can share our respective emails for the benefit of the group. So.
Well, thanks, Sid.
Thanks, Sid, and thanks to the group. I think just some of the things. I've got a question here from one of the delegates and one of the attendees. What are some of the examples of the most exciting construction technologies you've seen in the last 2 years? And that's, I guess, maybe to Brett and Sid.
I'll let Brett go first and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, I'll kick this off. And I think Sid mentioned it with smartvid.io, I think, which is basically the computer vision for the construction site, which identified safety issues. I was directly in contact with Josh Canner, who is part of that business, and I was quite staggered at the actual performance of that technology and the desire to integrate that back into things like the common data environment and linking those safety issues back to the actual project and measuring, who's dealing with those safety issues, what's the outcome, and the kind of the follow-on effect. For me, that was just staggering. Someone who'd worked in high-rise construction for many years, the fact that someone could walk around with a phone or a tablet and run the computer vision, run that through some sort of machine learning technology at the back end, and it would immediately identify if someone wasn't wearing a hard hat or if there was a trip hazard. Or I just find that absolutely unbelievable. And the actual maturity of that technology has moved on, even in the 18 months since it launched. So for me, that's just exciting. Any way that we can automate that process of getting safety to digital to outcomes and inform, for me, I think that's gold. I loved seeing that. It was brilliant.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Brett. And I guess just continuing
and
on with
just one thing, Shannon, if I may just add.
Sure.
Where we also look at and find real value, and Brett talked about smartvid.io, but I think broadly speaking, one area of real opportunity for Autodesk is investing both through organic development, but also we look to partner with other companies or acquire, has really been around artificial intelligence, machine learning. Our acquisition of Pipe was a great example of that, where we took a very manual process, used machine learning to automate the building of the submittal register. And while the product itself is today US-centric, we have had and are having ongoing conversations with NatSpec to see if we can bring that technology over to Australia as well. So we do believe the use of AI and ML is going to continue to really drive efficiencies and also at the same time reduce risk, which frankly Pipe's offering does today. Outside of that, as Brett indicated, there are other use cases, AI with computer vision and smart fit, but we generally think that concept is going to be, or those technologies will be really critical going forward, and that's what we're really excited about.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks, and it's great to hear, some of the things, Brett and Sid, that you're excited about. Maybe we've got a few minutes left, and just, I guess, a question to the whole team. And we talked about some exciting things that have been seen in the last couple of years from the audience question. But maybe sort of turning towards the future. I know, Sid, you sort of touched on this a little bit just in your last comment. But maybe a question to the whole team about some of the things you're excited about, in the next few years going forward. One of the things we like to do at the AMCA and BIM MEPOS is to try and weave in a very, very practical element to technology and the adoption of technology. So having that balance between practicality and where what's exciting about the future. Maybe just some comments from each of you around that moving forward.
I personally feel over the next few years, I think the convergence of manufacturing and construction software or processes, I think is going to be really exciting. I think that's something that it doesn't need to be such a disjointed, discrete process. I think that is a great vision to aspire to, and we believe, and I feel excited because one of the very few companies, or maybe in fact the only company that can deliver on that. And so we today, if you think about it, we've got customers that are using it on the design side, we've got subcontractors, we've got head contractors, they're all using our platform in different ways. And it would be really great if they could all collaborate with each other on one application. I think part of that initial foray for us has been the development of our computer environment and Autodesk Dock. I don't want to make this more about really Autodesk, but generally about the opportunity that we see. The second piece that we really think is going to be interesting is over time, we're going to start to further and further, and this is my belief, and I'm starting to see this, is displace the good old, someone calls it the green monster, which is Excel. I think our industry has been way too much ingrained in Excel, and I think, if anything, what the pandemic has taught us is collaboration and the ability to interact with teams. And I think we will see the use of applications, cloud applications, more so than before. Those are a couple of things that I'm thinking through. I'm sure Ian and Brett have their views as well.
Yeah, I'll go next. And I think, to bring it way back to a more practical level, in particular in Australia, if you look at what the AEC industry is trying to do, in particular around data, it's standardise and harmonise. And once you do that and you connect that to things like the cloud and you automate that process, you've optimised. And that's where we need to be. And my team and myself are looking really closely at what some of the practical things that we can do to enable that process, given, again, you look at the work of BIM EPOS in terms of the standardisation and the structure and the schemas and the data. We can then automate certain processes around that. And that's where I think we're going to be. I think the next stage of the journey of the industry is rapid and acceleration of automation. Automating menial tasks. Sid mentioned it around Excel. We'd love to kind of move away from, manual data entry in Excel to completely automating that process and actually using Excel as a lever or a progenitor to get to somewhere else. So I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see more from Autodesk in that space, most definitely. And I'm excited to be working with the AMCA on some of those initiatives as well.
All right, shall I jump in next? So in a similar vein, those that know me know I'm kind of all about the data anyway. But as I see us moving down this path and the increased use or inclusivity of data in modelling, it's how we package, transport and access that's going to become really interesting. And there are going to be some learnings on how we deal, how we work with it, and challenging the norm to some degree. Maybe the old adage of having one model per discipline per building needs to be scaled back. So I'd rather see 3 models per building that have got all of the information in it, rather than saying, well, we have to pull back on the data. It's a bit like going on holiday and having 2 suitcases with everything than one that's overpacked and you had to leave stuff at home, because you can always re-aggregate back at the other end. With tools like Assemble or Stitching Together for Navisworks for visualization, database integration, getting that information tagged and across to your final destination point is the important piece.
So I think, in terms of the next phase, in terms of just these practical steps, is I think in some sense we know what needs to be done from an initiative perspective around those really high touch items. So in the last 12 months or so, we've gone back and reworked the ductwork specification and the pipework specification, and now I think I wouldn't really see those going for another iteration of development for quite some time. So we think we've got to a really good place with those. In terms of what that's enabled to happen is that a lot of the supply chain is standardised around those standards, and a number of manufacturers have really transformed their business into lean manufacturing businesses. So if you look at some of the biggest duct manufacturers in the country, they're all standardised around the standards that are built into BIM EPOS, and in part that's because they contributed to those. The other thing that we're currently working on is particularly those items that are the essential safety measure components that really need to be maintained through the whole life of the asset. And the one that we're working on directly at the moment is around fire, smoke and air dampers, because those items, there's a lot of them in a building, and we know they're high, they've got high involvement from a content perspective, and a construction commissioning certification process, but then that translates into a very high sort of requirement or complex requirement when it comes to the life cycle maintenance of the building. So you should expect to see a standard out hopefully early next year, which will really enable the industry and the key suppliers to standardise around those products. So we're really focused as an initiative at the moment on those things that are high value, perhaps simpler from a data perspective, but we'll deliver significant value to all the stakeholders, designers, constructors, certifiers, building owners and service companies. So that'll be the focus over the next 6 to 12 months.
Fantastic, thanks Warwick. I mean, I'm always excited to talk to a group of people like this with this sort of knowledge, and always learn a lot, as I said earlier, every time I speak to the team. So it's fantastic. Look, we are at the end of the panel session timing. So I'd just really like to thank Warwick, Ian, Brett and Sid all the way from Boston for joining us today. It's probably getting a little bit late for you there, Sid, so I appreciate you spending the time with us today and giving us that insight.